Good morning, everyone. So it's exciting to be here today to host this event. Hard to follow your boss when he's such an eloquent and elegant speaker. But what I wanted to do and what we want to do this morning is build on the opening remarks and really talk about more tangibly the significant leaps forward that have been achieved by the SBN members moving towards measurable change. And you've already had it hinted at you. We have members that are taking very different approaches to sustainable finance, and they're in very different phases of their journey. So we'll tease that out as we go. We have 5 panelists today. 4, as you already heard, and I guess I don't have to try to mess anyone's name up because Ron kindly did that for me. We have 4 panelists that are deputy heads of the financial sector regulator from an SBN member country. And then we also have a 5th panelist, Dr. Aisha Mahmood, who's a special advisor to the governor on sustainable banking for the Central Bank of Nigeria. And you'll see in a moment that Nigeria's made some great progress, and it is definitely in a different phase than some of your other fellow members. So it'd be great to kind of hear the different phases everyone's in. In all cases, the central banks and the national treasuries have been supported by IFC regional environmental, social, and government programs in collaboration with our network team. And, you know, we feel sort of this collective membership and emphasis on the collective has really helped everyone benefit from different members' experience and lessons learned. So we are very, very proud to be supporting SBN members to drive the large-scale adoption of sustainable finance that you're all seeking in your own markets. I have a beautiful speech that my colleague Ron wrote that's another 5 pages long, and this is not a commentary wrong on the quality, but I'm smart enough to realize that I'm not the star attraction today, so I'm going to stop here with that, and I'm going to move right into talking to the panelists. So to kick things off, what we're going to do is, I really want everyone to keep in mind, we're trying to tease out lessons learned, any kind of actual change or impact you've seen on the market based on advances you've made. You get 8 minutes. I was told Bangi last year smiled really wide when she thought you were breaking the law on the 8 minutes. So I'll try not to smile. Hopefully you won't make me smile. But I'll ask you a series of questions, and you can have the 4 minutes to tackle them as you see fit. So first off, what are the key developments in your country that you've achieved in the past couple of years to advance sustainable finance policies and ensure these policies result in real impact? Have you got at the top of your mind any lessons learned that you think might be relevant to other members in the network? Are there a couple of things you could suggest to focus on collectively at the global level in order to deepen and expand the development of sustainable finance? And can you describe any key impacts achieved or that you are hoping to achieve, depending on where you are in this journey, at the operational level of the financial market in your country? And how are you measuring or planning to measure those? We'll go there, and then Dr. Mahmood, I'll come to you with a couple of special questions, if you don't mind. Maybe we'll kick off with Dr. Opoku Afari. You don't mind being the brave one?
Yes, that's fine. Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning. Thank you very much. I want to start by sharing the Ghana experience, what we've done so far, and where we are in the journey. I will start by saying that Ghana is almost at the end of the journey where we're getting ready to actually launch the roadmap. What has happened is that we have been able to get the support of IFC and PwC to be able to put together the Ghana Sustainable Banking Principles. But what has been very important in this is that with the new government that came into power in about 2 years ago, gave a huge political boost to these sustainable banking principles. But by itself adopting a sustainable agenda, signing a sustainable agenda in 2018, which really focused on sustainability underpinning the government economic policy. So that created a whole country concept within which sustainable financing will fit in. This sustainable agenda for the government in the medium term is looking at social investment in people and also protected and safe environment. That has created a bigger environment for sustainable finance, and we see the need for the financial sector in Ghana to play a key role in achieving that. And that has actually put into perspective the Ghana Sustainable Banking Principle that we've developed. We have now reached the stage where we're waiting for a sign-off from the central bank. We actually partner with key institutions in Ghana that will enhance its implementation. We partnered with the Environmental Protection Agency. We also partnered with the Ghana Association of Bankers. So we already have a strong buy-in from the sustainable banking principles. Once the central bank, the Bank of Ghana, signs it off, we expect to engage the key players in the banking sector. We have routine bi-monthly meetings with the MDs of banks. We expect to roll this out with the MDs of banks and also get other roundtable stakeholders to get the buy-in to sign off, and after that we will launch the Ghana Sustainable Banking Principles. What is important is that the Ghana Sustainable Banking Principles will be given out or will be issued as a directive of the Bank of Ghana, which will fall under the Act 930, which will then give effect to compliance and enforcement. Because once we issue that as a directive, then it's covered under the Banking Act, so we'll then be able to enforce it as part of enforcing the prudential requirements. So that will help banks to integrate sustainable finance into their intermediation activities and ensure that we're able to achieve the bigger objective that the government has in terms of social investment in people and also protected and safe environment. So I think in the nutshell, this is what we've done in Ghana, and we are looking forward to very soon launching the roadmap for sustainable banking principles in Ghana. Thank you.
Was it all a smooth journey?
No, it wasn't that smooth, but I think that what has really helped is the political boost that we had. To have the whole government incorporating sustainable agenda in its economic policies actually paves the way for sustainable financing to be a key part of financial intermediation in Ghana. And I see that as a big lesson that maybe we can share with other countries.
Thank you. Dr. Veera Singhe, can you talk to us a little bit about Sri Lanka's experience?
Yeah, thank you. Again, let me thank the IFC for giving us the opportunity. I think in my remarks, I will focus on three areas. First, the national agenda of Sri Lanka on sustainability and sustainable development agenda, then how that fits into the financial sector and the sustainable finance agenda, and also our role, as central bank, the regulator, and the way forward. Those are the four areas that I would like to focus. On the first, the national agenda, I think Sri Lanka is one of the countries which earlier MDGs, we made a substantial progress in meeting MDGs. And now, after introducing this sustainable development agenda, Sri Lanka has given a lot of priority on the national agenda to meet all these goals. And in fact, I'm proud to say Sri Lanka, on the national level, Sri Lanka is the first country to appoint a parliamentary select committee on sustainable development. That's one of the that gives us the idea that government and the national agenda has given a priority. And obviously, we have a government, the head of state, the president, himself gives the Minister of Environment, and it gives the priority and focus on SDGs. That is the initiative coming from the head of state that he is so passionate about the environment and also the protecting environment and the sustainable development. So that's where we have the national priority and the full support, and also from the government, the parliament. And if you look at two budgets which was announced in 2018 and 2019, in fact, one of the theme of the budget 2018 by the Minister of Finance is a blue-green budget. It means in that blue-green budget, the theme which focuses on sustainable development by the government in the budget. And also in 2019 budget also, there are a lot of proposals that were introduced to promote sustainable development as a national agenda in the country. That is on the national side. I think that's a blessing from our side. We have a full support and cooperation on the national level. And then when I move into sustainable finance side, that is, we have three regulators in Sri Lanka. One is Central Bank of Sri Lanka, regulates banks and non-bank financial institutions. Then SEC regulates the capital market, and insurance sector, IBSL. The three regulators. That is where I think once we had this national agenda, it's very timely fit into we became a member of the SBN back in 2016. Obviously, we were lucky to have Rong based in Sri Lanka for 3 years. And she and Amina, the representative, came and persuaded us to become a member in 2016. And then we looked at what we can do from the finance side. And that is where we took this project to first become a member, and then we had the blessing from the president himself, and initially we launched what we call a workshop on sustainable finance with the support of the IFC, bringing technical support, and president himself attended and gave a very strong message that we want to go in this direction, and he all supported. And as a result, now our responsibility was to launch sustainable banking, the roadmap. And this is where I think when obviously central bank is not an expert in this area. We're looking for technical support and also financial support, because central bank has no mandate to spend money on this area. That is where another international organization, UNDP, Biofinance Initiative, came and helped us financially to develop the roadmap. That was a great help. And IFC gave us a technical support. And with that, within this last couple of years, we were able to develop sustainable finance, the roadmap, with a very wide consultation with all the stakeholders, especially the Securities and Exchange Commission, insurance regulator, as well as the Banking Association of Sri Lanka. They took in fact, before we formally launched this, our Banking Association of Sri Lanka already had voluntary guidelines issued and signed by MOUs with large number of commercial banks in Sri Lanka. They're already well ahead of the regulator and what we have done here. So this is a recognition of what Bank Association did earlier, and we are recognizing formally, and we think with giving the timelines, action plan, and with the clear goals that we are to achieve in the next couple of years. I think after this finance workshop, and also on the other area that we had a gap is skill development, enhance skills for the people in the finance sector. That is also where we have support, already getting support from the IFC as well as from the UNDP. So we are now going to conduct skill development programs for us to be able to implement our roadmap going forward. This is where also we are getting a lot of support. This is one of the examples, I think, lesson we can learn, that international organization like UNDP, and there are several other organizations working on similar areas. Then this proper coordination can leverage and can use resources much more efficiently. This is where what we did in terms of UNDP and the IFC coming together and giving support for the roadmap as well as skill development. And I think with that proper coordination, we should be able to implement this with all the timelines that we are given. And also, I think there are a lot of details in the roadmap. I think there's a lot of people, you are familiar here. The areas that we are covering, there are 6 focus areas. One is falling in line to the 2030 agenda in Sri Lanka. This is where the sustainable development goals we are trying to meet by 2030. Then we have financing vision 2030, and the integration into financial markets Financial inclusion is also one of the areas that central bank is heavily involved, bringing in national financial inclusion strategy. That's also we are involved in capacity building, skill developments, then international cooperation, as you mentioned earlier, plus obviously the measurement and reporting at the next stage. I think we are not as much as what the Ghana has gone, but hopefully we will be there with this. And this is where I think the way forward we are looking at setting up of formal committees, coordination between government institutions to get this implemented as planned. So I can see a lot of support coming from not only from the finance sector but also national agenda, support from the government, the president. I think that's a blessing for us. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Deputy Governor Arshil, how about the perspective of the National Bank of Georgia?
Thank you. So we joined the Sustainable Banking Network in September 2017 and started to working on the framework for sustainable finance. As sustainability issue, it's one of the medium-term and long-term risks, and it needs proper policy actions. And we need to make the roadmap, which is very important for the private sector, to have predictability in these actions. And that's why we today already mentioned, we today launched this roadmap, which we think is the starting point for this journey to sustainable finance and sustainable economy in general. So last year, with the help of the IFC, organized workshop in Georgia to increase awareness among the stakeholders and to understand their feedback, what the issues they see in general. And during this workshop, I think that one of the main conclusions was that we need this roadmap, and also we need more awareness among the players, and also we need more guidance for the market participants. We are working to incorporate ESG principles into corporate governance. In terms of the banks, we already adopted corporate governance code, which includes ESG requirements to manage risk and also to disclosure. And this is mandatory for commercial banks. We are currently working for corporate sector who are interested in capital market or are participating in capital market. For those, management incorporation of the ESG risks and disclosure will be on the principles comply or explain. And for rest of the corporate sector, it will be voluntary. But of course, for disclosure, it's very important that there is a guidelines for the sector, and we are now working on this reporting and disclosure principles, and it's expected to be ready by the end of this year. So from the next year, banks will start publishing their reports. Our consists in 4 parts. The first is the awareness and the capacity building, which is maybe starting point for every reform. The second part is the measures which will help capital to flow in more sustainable sectors. For that, we are discussing different ideas and issues, and we are working with SBN colleagues to see whether we might use some regulatory framework to support bank credit to be channeled to more sustainable loans. The third pillar is ESG management, which also needs which is very important for sustainable development. So these risks are taken into account when the decision is making in the financial sector. And 4th pillar is about the transparency and market discipline. And as Vice President mentioned this morning, if you disclose, if it's transparent, then you start it managing. I think that's very important observation. So for that, as I already mentioned, we are working on guidelines for commercial banks. They hope, and they will most likely start publishing reports for 2020, which will be annual reports, and it will be starting from 2021. In terms of the lessons and our experience, this is a very long-term process, sustainable finance, and for banks to take into consideration, to internalize this risk, they need some short-term benefits or maybe some short-term pressures. In our case, two largest banks are listed on the London Stock Exchange, so there are some requirements for them already. So it's kind of supporting this framework to develop locally. Also, we try to support issuing of green bonds, which will be motivating for corporate sector who are capital market players. For that, we translated ICMA principles in Georgian language, and also try to support corporates in terms of verification process. And because Georgia is a small country and issuing bonds, it's not easy, and if cost of underwriting it's high, it becomes even harder. So one of the issue which we like to pay attention is the cost of the green bond verification, and also comparability, because as we learned, there are different measures and different taxonomies in different countries or different jurisdictions, and if there will be more harmonization between these taxonomies, that it will make easier to compare between countries. It will make easier to make proper disclosure, and also maybe the cost of the issuing bonds will also decrease. So these are the issues we are currently working on, and I think that's sustainable banking network. It's very important in sharing experience, and it was very important tool for us, which allowed us to move forward in this direction.
Thank you. Deputy General Mukhajani, how about the view from the National Treasury in South Africa?
Thank you very much. Our own experiences have been a very difficult experience. And the journey that we undertook to date has been very tough and very controversial, call it that for now. 13 years ago, we were here at the World Bank. Just give an anecdote of the coal our own ESCOM plant, which is having a whole lot of coal-powered plants. We came to the World Bank, and we were saying to the World Bank, we need a loan, $3.75 billion at the time. And then the World Bank had issues, and some countries had issues. The board was divided. And at some point, we also were arrogant a bit at the time, and we said, what do you expect us to do with the coal that we have? Should we throw it in the sea? Because it has to power us for generations and generations to come. So what do we do? 200 years that we have, enough coal deposits, we want to burn the fossils, and then it's all because we needed the money. But obviously, we ended up having some arrangement and conditions, and finally, we got the loan. But it's interesting. 10 years later, we have moved. 10 years later, the same group of people had to turn around and start talking sustainable finance, take into account all the challenges that are facing us, and also acknowledging that if we don't do anything about issues around sustainable finances, issues around E&S, we are in trouble. So what did we do? I mean, I can hear some colleagues are saying here that for us to even establish a working group and a discussion group and a forum, it didn't come naturally, it didn't come easy because of the complexity that we had that defines us as a country. So it's a milestone for us, and this is something that obviously one can report to say, in 2017, we were able to come up and set up a sustainable working group. By that, it's something to write home about, because once we did that, we then were able to say to ourselves that we have achieved, all because at least there's a common understanding as to where we should be going vis-a-vis where we were 10 years before in 2006, 2007. So that was a big milestone in South Africa. And the extensive input coming from this working group landed us into a draft sustainable finance policy document that was developed, where all of us rally around one key issue in identifying and understanding actions and the risks that are facing us, and obviously how the financial sector has to come in the picture. And one can write something home about the progress to date, to say that we are shifting towards a low-carbon economy. It was not by default that, again, a key milestone in our own evolution was hosting COP17 in 2011. That, I think, really changed the mindset of South Africa, because the focus on the world was on us, and it forced us internally as a country to have a discussion and a conversation around where we should be going. It's also important to actually also announce and recognize that some of our leading banks, different from where we are at, and we are with them, we are at one with them here, some of our leading banks have already announced that they will no longer finance new coal-related projects, which is a good story. But again, I guess as we move into this direction, we have to balance things out. That as we do that, we obviously have our own growth and development challenges that we must address. There are commitments that many countries, especially your developed countries, made, in particular to low-income countries, around adaptation measures that needed to rally around each other. Some of these never materialize. So as banks take this view, as we have to, the imperatives, we have to obviously acknowledge that we have to approach this carefully. We've got a very successful renewable energy independent power producer program. I mean, people are writing it as a case study for most countries. We are proud because clearly you could see the financial sector coming to the party in financing projects. Albeit expensive, we have to renegotiate at some point, because it cannot be that the kilowatt per hour can be in South African rands 2.71 when the average is at least 90 cents or 91 cents. At some point we have to revisit that, because clearly balancing the need for renewables and also balancing the investments that the banks are making and the cost thereof. So we have Regulation 28 in our Pension Funds Act, where we require boards of funds, of these pension funds, to consider environmental and social governance factors before investing in assets. It's, again, a big milestone for us. We recently, after years and years of conversation and toil, fighting about it with various sectors in South Africa, we have passed the carbon tax bill. We now announced, I think implementation will be from the 1st of June, which will encourage movement, obviously, towards low carbon sector. So from where we were in 2006, 2007 to where we are now, I guess it's you can say we have really moved. Finally, 2 points. I think we want to ensure that the paper that I was talking about, where I was saying there's a sustainable finance, we want to establish that so that we can show a signal as to where we want the financial sector to incorporate some of the ESG considerations, and also make sure that we improve reporting measures that will enhance disclosure for regulators, so that we're able to collect data that will improve where we are. So we have moved, and I think we can pat ourselves in the shoulder and say we did well, but we have a balancing, very critical, and this is not a challenge for South Africa only. I guess it's a challenge for all developing economies, emerging economies, as to how do you balance issues around sustainable finance versus issues of growth and development. And so it's going to be a continuous challenge as we move forward. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Mahmood, last but not least, would you share with us a bit about the key ESG risks in Nigeria and the areas of the economy that you think need more capital to achieve the SDGs and climate goals, and which areas of the financial market you think are best positioned to help deliver this?
Okay. Thank you very much. Before I answer that question, as a founding member of the SBN, Nigeria has enjoyed tremendous support from IFC and the SBN in terms of knowledge learning, building, and then also sharing global best practices. And I think it's something that I need to mention here is one of the drivers, that has been driving the country to achieve all these. So thank you very much. Two key things that I want to discuss. One, Nigeria with a population of 98 million, which has been projected by the UN to reach 400 million by the year 2030, 2050. Is key because the population growth is exponential and is disproportionate to the available resources. So that is the issue. But the most important one is that Nigeria is an oil-producing country with a maximum crude oil production of about 2.5 million barrels per day. It is ranked as the Africa's largest oil-producing country and the 6th in the world. So this oil exploration has started since the 1960s, and 5 decades of this has resulted in environmental degradation in the country in terms of biodiversity losses, coastal ecosystem, flooding, erosion, deforestation, gas flaring, oil pollution as a result of spillage, and all these together drive climate change. So this is a key ESG risk for the country. But then, despite dependence on oil, Nigeria agriculture remains the largest sector of the economy in Nigeria. And we have to develop strategies and initiatives to diversify the economy, that is, to reduce the dependence on oil and gas through agricultural development. So the country now currently is implementing strategies and initiatives to take agriculture back to its former pride in the 60s before the exploration of oil in the country. And as you are aware, the ESG risks in agriculture includes greenhouse gas emissions, water use, chemical use such as fertilizer and pesticides, child labor, land grabbing, etc. All these are also issues for Nigerian agricultural development. The SBN, as a result of the implementation of Nigerian Sustainable Principles, has developed tools to manage climate risks and social risks associated with agricultural development. I'll just mention two of these because of the time. The first one is the Nigerian Incentive Risk Sharing System for Agricultural Lending, which was established in 2013 to encourage bank lending to agriculture. And this is a $300 million risk sharing facility that is used to share losses on agricultural loans through credit risk guarantee. Because we realized that most of the banks were not willing to lend to agriculture because of the climate risk that is associated to the sector. The second one is the Anchor Borrowers Program. This was established in 2015 to reduce poverty and generate employment, and also a way of diversifying the economy and moving away from dependence on oil. As of today, 43.9 million naira has been 200,000 smallholder farmers. And this has created 2.5 million direct jobs in the country. And also, this tool has a mechanism that has provided safety net to farmers against climate-related losses such as flooding. And this is through revenue index insurance. So these are some of the key initiatives. On the areas of the economy that needs more capital to achieve the SDGs, according to World Bank, Nigeria needs about $142 million to be able to meet its targets, that is the Paris Climate Agreement and then the SDG goals. Although these are also, there is also an opportunity of about $304 billion according to World Bank. So Nigeria has adopted innovative and sustainable finance instruments to accelerate mobilization of capital to bridge this funding gap. The first is in collaboration with UNEP Inquiry, Nigeria launched the Nigerian Sustainable Finance Roadmap, which outlines recommendations that can unlock the investment opportunity and that is needed to move the country onto a more sustainable trajectory. Also, Nigeria issued the Africa's first sovereign bond of 10.69 billion naira in 2017 to raise additional capital to fund low-emission projects in energy and agriculture. And this will facilitate achieve also SDGs Paris Agreement commitment. This also made Nigeria the fourth country in the world after France, Poland, and Fiji to launch a sovereign bond. We are also planning to launch the second tranche sometime this year. The next thing is also to diversify this investor base. Nigeria also launched a Scoop. You know, Scoop is an ethical investment platform that is Sharia compliant because of the growing need by investors to become responsible and ethical investors. The Scoop of 100 billion naira was launched, each in 2017 and 2018. The Central Bank of Nigeria is also mobilizing capital towards the achievement of SDGs through the implementation of the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, which was launched since 2012, and then the Nigerian Sustainable Finance Roadmap, which was developed for the non-banking regulators, that is the asset managers, capital market, insurance, etc., to make sure that they incorporate transparency, governance, and integrate sustainability activities, investment decisions. Then also the Nigerian Stock Exchange issued a sustainability disclosure guidelines in 2018 to encourage corporate governance and then sustainability reporting for all its listed companies. The last activity that was done in Nigeria or initiative the Nigerian Corporate Governance Code that was just released early this year. And this corporate governance code has sustainability as a standalone principle. So these are some of the activities in a nutshell. But before closing, when Ethiopia was mentioning the next steps, he mentioned about 4, and I'm happy to tell you that Nigeria has already implemented 2 out of those 4. That is, the first one he mentioned was embed ESG risk management into day-to-day supervision framework. Already we have done that, and sustainability is part of the questions our supervisors ask when they their normal day-to-day supervision. And the second one is to develop a robust reporting framework. We did that when the sustainability principles were developed in 2012, and since then, banks have been rendering semi-annual reports to the Central Bank of Nigeria, which we use to measure progress on sustainability. So in a nutshell, this is...
Dr. Mohammed, you've been very busy. Rang, do we still have time for Q&A?
Yeah, we have 10 minutes. So
Okay.
I hope everybody is prepared, and there's a microphone on the table. So I think we have 10 minutes, but we have members also will stay us, so you can also have a side talk and also continue conversation. But we have 10 minutes, Mary.
Okay, great. Yep.
On the table.
This is Millat from Central Bank of Bangladesh. I have questions for from the representative in Nigeria, Aisha. Thank you so much for your nice presentation while you were in discussion. You talked about sustainable agriculture. As you know that there should be a clear-cut definition of green finance, which we don't have, and also the sustainable financing, but we have some definitions towards accuracy to define that. You talked about sustainable agriculture. How you relate that sustainable agriculture in defining you connect it to sustainable finance or green finance? Do you have a structured definition or categorization for that? And also to these questions that many of the green products are flying in the sky. You can say that, oh, that is the green product. You can say that that is the green product. But there should be a structured method to define the green product with respect to the international taxonomy of identifying the products as green one. So in what stand your country stands for, and how could you address these things from your agenda? Thank you.
Okay, do I answer?
Do you want to take a couple, or do you want
Mary, Jimmy just remind me, watch is wrong, so we have actually enough time. So we have at least, I think, 30 minutes our Q&A session. So please start to think about a question and address to anybody, and also report, and also say where an institution you come from.
Okay.
So I just
we go ahead and let Mohammed answer this one.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. We do not have a specific definition for green finance. As you are aware, globally there is a lot of taxonomy around green, around sustainable finance. And what we intend to do is to already adopt what is already existing, because I know like the climate initiatives, they've come up with taxonomy around green bonds, and they were part of the green bond issuance in Nigeria. So we adopt what is existing so that not to invent it. And we're just waiting to see other players come with other definitions, and we take what is suitable for the Nigerian environment. But what I think we need sustainable agriculture, smart agriculture, climate resilient agriculture, whatever you call it, the key issue is to make sure that agricultural productivity does not impact negatively on the environment and social issues. And this is basically what we are doing. So when we developed the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, there was a guideline on agriculture that was developed to accompany the implementation of the principles. So any bank that is lending into agriculture will use that guideline, to ensure that whatever they do in that space is sustainable.
Yeah. Can I share my country's experience regarding this? Do you have time for that to say about that?
Or bilateral?
Yes, we have time.
I should? Okay, 2 minutes. You see that we have got as many as 52 green products in 8 categories. It's about renewable energy, resource efficiency, then wind power, hydropower, liquid waste management, solid waste management, then green environmental brick manufacturing, green establishments, and miscellaneous. So as many as 8 categories, we have defined 52 green products. And simply, the banks, financial institutions are investing those products will be termed as green investment or green finance. So there is a broad definitions, but to practice on that, to move it on, to gear it up with the banks and financial institutions, the Central Bank of Bangladesh has defined that if you please invest in these products, that will be recognized as green investment or green finance. Apart from that, you are talking about the smart agriculture. So if that smart agriculture is being taken care of with relate to environmental and sustainability, we are approaching towards that investment of those agricultural sustainable products will incorporate the green investment or the green products. So we are broadening our definition to contribute more to green finance by the banks and financial institutions. And also we are addressing the sustainability agenda, not only the green investment, but also the corporate social responsibility activities of the banks. And these 2 things put together will address the sustainability. Thank you.
Mary, Ms. Milan is one of the pioneers in this space, and Central Bank of Bangladesh was also founding member of SBN.
Okay. Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Walid Ali. I'm working at the technical office for the Governor of Central Bank of Egypt. I would like to thank you very much for IFC and the SBN for the invitation. Actually, my short question will be to Mr. Dondo Mogajani from South Africa. Actually about the balance or the conflict between the need of the development of our countries and the SDGs goals and the ESG principles. We are actually in the banking sector, and then here I'm talking about our case in Egypt. We are giving different messages. We are asking the banks or pushing the banks, for example, to finance nuclear power projects. But on the other hand, we are telling them we are coming up with an exclusion list, which should exclude the industries that we are not in favor to finance. I know that, sir, you mentioned that there is kind of balance needs to be in place. But seriously, when hands-on the experience, we don't know how to do this balance. Maybe if we ask banks to support or to finance projects that are not very useful to the environment, maybe ask them on the other hand to do other projects or finance other projects will do good. So on the other hand, we are asking them to finance the harm, to try to do good to the community and the environment. The last thing I want to say also, maybe for Georgia, is the type of investments that will, the type of incentives that banks should get, maybe a taxation. And what about giving the projects that, sustainable project, a special interest rate, and then should be the difference in the interest rate supported by the regulator, for in our case, maybe Central Bank of Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a tough one. If you look at recently, as recent as a month or 2 weeks ago, in what happened in Mozambique and the rains, and what happened in Western Cape in South Africa, the drought, and clearly, and you could see dams literally running dry. And now, when you view the world like that with those eyes, clearly then that tells you that it's important that we have to gear ourselves as regulators, as policymakers, are thinking of creative adaptation and mitigation measures to address those challenges. When we came to the bank in 2006 to 2007, what the bank finally did in the World Bank and the board and agreeing to fund this coal-fired project, as a package, there were also clear targets on the renewables that we had to, as conditions that we had to meet. So again, there was a realization that, and that's the balance I was talking about, that I don't think it was a clear-cut, yes, here's the $3.75 billion, go and mess up the environment. But also, in it, the whole concept of clean coal came into being, flue gas desulfurization processes as part of those power plants, etc., including a climate fund that was set aside to actually address some of the adaptation and mitigation measures. So I think banks, obviously, in there, that's the balance I was talking about. But the reality is that, setting up timelines and timeframes and exit, those things are necessary. Or else you'll have another Western Cape and another Mozambique situation everywhere, every time at once. So I think it's important to balance because it's not a myth anymore that clearly climate change is a reality, global warming is a reality, and that we need to approach this differently. So again, it is not a choice that we have anymore as a global society, but we have to really gear our mindsets in a particular way, different way.
Thank you for the comment. For sure, banks need some motivation because they need to act. And in our case, one of the motivating factors we think will be when they will start disclosure. And if they can demonstrate that they are doing better for the society, that they are competitor, I think that will be one of the motivating factors, because if bank itself is a long-term investment, and if you demonstrate you have the long-term vision, you are careful about the long-term development, you can get better funding or better terms for your capital. This is one of the motivating factors we hope will become available where the reporting starts. Another motivation is their investor base, so that now there are more and more investors are paying attention to these issues, especially for those banks who are listed on international markets. The motivation through some subsidy or some supporting, it's a more difficult issue. One of the ideas we are discussing internally is capital requirements. So thinking that to have lower capital requirements for those projects who are in a sustainable sector, as it creates less financial risks. But in general, if you decrease capital requirement for some projects, you need to increase somewhere else, and this is what we are discussing currently.
More questions? Mary, I think you managed really well. Your technique works. I thought my watch already. Oh, there's a question more.
Good morning, Rachana from, I'm representative of the Association of Banks in Cambodia. Actually, as we had the first celebration, Cambodia just launched our sustainable finance principle, and we now in the stage of implementation. So probably it would be great to hear from the governor, the central bank from other country to share us that when coming to implementation, there are many challenges to encourage to all the member bank to adopt the principle. And one of the key questions we try to do is that how we prioritize each bank, that what would be the principle that they should work first before from the first stage to the next stage. So what would be the role of the central bank to support the member bank to adopt the principle in order to achieve the goal? Thank you.
Maybe just to share the experience of Ghana, what we plan to do is that once this is signed off and we start the implementation, we're planning to give a 2-year moratorium period where the banks will get used to the principles and the guidance that have been given. We're also planning a training program for key officers in the banks in terms of how to apply the principles. We've also developed KPIs which will be monitored as part of supervisory rounds that's been done by the supervision department. And so that after 2 years, when this kicks in, then we'll start enforcing the reporting requirements in terms of how lending activities have been influenced by these principles. So I think from the perspective of Ghana, we're not going the prescriptive approach to say that these are identified areas to invest, but more in the sense of these are the guidelines and how are the guidelines integrated in the intermediation activities and how these are being reported.
Thank you. For Nigeria, the Sustainable Banking Principle started as a voluntary initiative. That is, it was the banks themselves, that came together and said this to happen. But then we realized that if we just leave it as that, then there will be difficulty to track and monitor implementation. So that's when the Nigerian Central Bank now came and developed the reporting template, which the banks have been rendering on their implementation. But one thing I want to share here is that we realize sustainability is an emerging issue, and there is need to build capacity and competence so that people will be able to implement both within the banking sector and then within the regulator. So what we did was, as early as 2014, the thing was implemented, so adopted in 2012, we started implementation, but the first thing we did in 2013 was to train and retrain, including all the board members, a top-bottom approach, so that sustainability now is the buzzword in the boardroom. When you bring issues on sustainability, the board members are aware, and so you have their buy-in. So that is important, that is key. And the next thing that I think is important is to put up structures. You need to institutionalize sustainability. Because if you just leave it, the bankers have their own mandate. The central bank has its own mandate, but there must be somebody that can be held accountable. And so in Central Bank of Nigeria, what we did, I was employed, to drive the sustainability agenda within the country since that 2012. And then we also now have a group within the banking supervision that is responsible for sustainability. And we set up a division within one of the departments in Central Bank to internalize sustainability within the Central Bank. So that division is now responsible for looking at our carbon footprint and then discussing what we need to do in collaboration with my office. So that is it. And then within the banks, we also ask them to have at least a sustainability desk or a unit within the bank that will also be held responsible for the implementation of sustainability. So I think these are some of the things that we need to put in place to be able to have a smooth implementation of any policy. Thank you.
Just building on Dr. Aisha's point, I think along the panelists all emphasize this collaboration among private sector and public sector. And we already observe among the 20 countries already launched policy that this dynamics of market action with policy leadership. So I also have a question with Dr. Versinghe. You mentioned the Banking Association in Sri Lanka already launched voluntary principles. And then remember, during this journey, the first question is you ask and your team asks, what's the central bank's role with this voluntary, now moving mandatory? But we want complementary, but not overlapping. So what's your view? Actually, now with you launching the roadmap, you probably already thought through.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is an important question to identify the role of the regulator, promoter, and the two different roles here. So I think in our way, we as regulators, we central bank and as well as the CC and insurance regulator, our role mainly, as we articulated well in the roadmap, is to encourage and provide guidelines and encourage banks, financial institutions to incorporate ESG risk in their risk management principles and bring that into the board, into the management, and bring their skills. And by encouraging them to incorporate ESG risk into their decision-making process, because that will certainly develop a business case for them to promote the green, the sustainable financing. That is, I think, the important role. And also from the other side, the public sector and the private sector. And public sector, obviously government, right, I think in our role, we as a regulator, we don't have instruments, we don't have mandate to promote all these things because we are a regulator. So the promotion side, I think the government, the public sector and the private sector has a different role to play, whereas I think what you have seen from the government side, right, what they call incentives, interest subsidies, the tax incentives, all these things will not come to the fiscal policy side. That is where, if you look at Sri Lanka's experience, and that's what we are going to go forward, is that all the incentives in renewable energy, agriculture, the import duties, motor vehicle, the hybrid, all these things, those are coming through the government, the fiscal policy side. We as a regulator, we trying to incorporate all this into risk management and encourage and issue guidelines to the finance sector, and then make them also accountable and make it measurable so that one can monitor their performance and incorporate their practices, business practices. That is, I think, our role as a regulator. That is where, and obviously, as Ron mentioned, before we start, our Sri Lankan Bank Association already started issuing voluntary guidelines. And we, from doing this, we formally recognized what they have been doing, and we also, by recognizing that, gives a bit of a stronger role for them to promote. That their role is to promote green finance, their role is to promote the products, their role is to finance the sustainable projects. And this is where I think we have to clearly identify the role of the regulator, role of the government, and role of the private sector and the bankers. That's where I think we are trying to move in that direction separately.
Great, thank you. Mary, I think we ask for the last question, and then Mary, maybe 5 minutes you conclude. I have a big task later on, have a group photo. So we have time for that.
I need a brush.
Any last question from the audience? Ms. Millen always have active questions. Okay, last question is yours. You have the microphone over there.
Thank you for Sri Lanka presenter, Deputy Governor. You were talking about the regulation of the banks and financial institutions. Have you given a target for the banks and financial institutions to achieve the green finance? That is the total out of the total allocations. This percentage should have to be contributed to green finance. That is one question. And the other one is how you, for the environmental and social risk management guidelines, and who are the persons to be responsible, accountable to the regulations of central bank, that is the banks and financial institutions, they should have a sustainable finance unit or something there to respond, to be accountable and responsible to your regulations. Thank you.
The first question, we had not come to that stage yet. I think only the kind of regulation or guidance that we have on the central bank to the financial is to lend to the agriculture sector at least 10% of the overall portfolio. But to set up certain targets for green projects, we need to have proper definition, clear identification of what the green projects are. I think that is where we need to move on. I don't think, and also the way that we are managing regular supervising the banks, we are not in favor of setting certain directed kind of quotas. This is only to encourage the banks to follow those principles and bring that business practices into the business making process, so that they themselves recognize, and we only provide guidelines at this stage. But at later stage, there are certain instruments, like people talking about the different the reserve requirements. So those are the things that we may consider going forward. And first thing, we need to have proper standards, guidelines to identify. Without that, I think it's difficult to have this kind of, you lend this amount of money to this sector. I think the sectoral kind of lending practices are basically, it's not the best way of regulation going forward. I think that's where we are.
I got your point. I think your banks and financial institutions are not in a positions, did not reach to that point, but it will come later on. Okay.
Earlier, in fact, we don't have an issue with that. If you look at this agriculture sector on the total overall economy, is about 10%. So there was a regulation coming from the past that 10% is required, but that was not a difficult thing. It's mainly coming from the concern from the financial inclusion side, large number of agriculture production from the small producers. That is where the credit is not flowing as much as we would like to those sectors. That is where the regulation came in, but banks do not find it difficult now to lend because 10% is the sector and the 30% of the population are employed in agriculture. So it's not that difficult. But there are certain, for example, foreign banks with few branches, they find it difficult. Then obviously we have created a fund so that they can make a contribution to their fund. And out of that fund, this money can be directed to those areas. So that is the alternative way of doing that.
I got it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mary, would you like to have a short summary or conclusion in the panel?
Super short. So, I think we heard from countries that are in very different points in their journey, from having just set up a framework to having already issued bonds. And one of my big takeaways is that even though everyone sounded like it was effortless for the most part, it's not. It's a long process. It's a complicated process. Grappling with issues like balancing growth and development objectives, often which are challenging in themselves, with also trying to promote something new to many, like sustainable finance, is not straightforward. In this institution, we set up working groups at the drop of a hat. Getting them to produce stuff is a different issue. So you saying that just getting a working group started was not easy really got me thinking. We're here. We want to continue to be the partners of all of you on this journey. And I think I'll quote from Mr. Mohajani. You all deserve a pat on the back for staying enthused and staying on a tough journey. So we're very appreciative of that. And I'll thank our